Over the last few weeks, I've come to a bit of a realization that if you have a budget of up to $400, then there's probably no better phone on the planet than this right here. A phone that was already really good at launch, but I think you'd be surprised how much better it has gotten whilst getting cheaper. And a massive thanks to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Okay, this is the OnePlus 7 Pro, and if you do a little digging, you can actually find one for about $300 for the phone only, $350 for the full unboxing experience and a phone that's in better condition, or about $400 for something closer to brand new. And I couldn't believe how well it's held up. I remember when I picked this phone up for the first time over a year ago and feeling like it was pretty heavy. It was a bulky phone, but in the 2020 landscape, having now got used to devices like the S20 Ultra, it doesn't stand out as particularly gargantuan, and by having the same gentle curvature on both the front and back, it actually has quite a comfortable, pebble-like quality. Plus, it's just fast. The 90Hz refresh rate, combined with UFS 3.0 storage and a Snapdragon 855 chipset, mean that nothing struggles. Sure, it would be nice to have the latest and greatest Snapdragon 865 chipset, but at the same time, not a single app or game has come out since this phone's release that it can't still run well and load quickly. Besides, spending this amount of money on most other phones would only get you a mid-range chipset anyway, which this will be anything from 30 to 100% faster than. I'm using it alongside the iPhone 11 Pro Max, and moving between them, it doesn't feel like I'm using a slower experiment phone like it sometimes does with these things. If anything, the OnePlus is probably nippier. It's got a dual speaker setup, it's got a good haptic engine for a nice typing experience. This feels high-end. And I think a big part of that is the display, a 6.67-inch curved Quad HD Plus fluid AMOLED panel. And while I don't personally mind the hole-punch cameras on the newer OnePlus 8 phones, they're fairly unobtrusive and they help make them slimmer, I have seen a lot of people who prefer this screen. Instead of a hole punch, the OnePlus 7 Pro uses a pop-up camera mechanism so that it can afford to have zero interruption on the screen itself. I won't lie to you, I do find the whirring sound of this camera going up and down a little jarring, but the movement is faster than I remember it being, and the resulting display is one that can stand proudly up against some of the best that 2020 has to offer. It makes the top-shelf Huawei P40 Pro's display look bad, and pitched against any modern mid-ranger, which are closer to it price-wise, it's not a competition. I do prefer the slightly subtler screen curvature on Samsung's latest flagships versus the big curves here, but I am nitpicking. Now, another potential concern is, will the cameras hold up? Short answer, yes. They're not spectacular, but the OnePlus 7 Pro has almost the same triple camera setup as the $700 OnePlus 8, including most of the software improvements that were given to that phone. But this one is better. The 7 Pro has a wider f1.6 aperture and laser autofocus, which was later dropped on the 8. So you get really snappy focusing and a good level of natural background blur. There's an ultra-wide camera, and it's not one of those naff ones that you'll never end up using. It's a good quality 16 megapixel ultra-wide. Like in this shot, it still has the dynamic range to be able to keep the detail in the bright sky, even if it is right up in the outer edge of the frame. Plus, instead of the waste of space macro camera on the OnePlus 8, you get a 3x telephoto here. And whilst, yes, having a telephoto camera is not as exciting and novel as it once used to be, the fact that this is 3x as opposed to standard 2x magnification does mean that its presence is felt. Also, something that I noticed when this phone first came out was that flicking between the cameras was a little janky, and each camera had a slightly different color profile, but they fixed it. Now, this isn't to downplay the OnePlus 8. I've gone on the record a few times already to say that if you are set on buying a new phone in a sealed box with your 1-year warranty, then this is still the way to go for a lot of people. But what I am saying is that for the OnePlus 7 Pro, the fact that A, the phone's hardware was almost ahead of its time when it launched, B, that the price has dropped a lot, and C, it's actually improved since launch, altogether mean that if you are willing to go down that pre-owned Amazon or eBay route, then I've never seen value quite like this. It's had huge customization improvements. The fine-tuning you can now do is something I've wanted for a long time. It now manages its RAM better, so you can run more concurrent applications, and it can now record smoother videos. Plus, the fact that it runs the same Snapdragon 855 chipset found in the Google Pixel 4, unlike Samsung phones which sometimes use Exynos chips, and Huawei phones which use Kirin chips, means that the Google camera app on the OnePlus 7 Pro works really well. I don't always prefer its results to the stock OnePlus camera app, but there's a few things it's really good at. You could take photos and it'll massively improve the texture on objects. You can take amazing portraits that look like Google Pixel 4 portraits. And you can use Google's night sight mode, which turns the phone's night mode capabilities from a B- to, I would say, an easy A-. So I've actually found myself flicking between the two different camera apps, depending on the situation I want to capture, and between them, it's tough to pick faults. Now, the two main caveats when buying a used or pre-owned phone that you should always watch out for are that they tend to get fewer updates, meaning they'll be outdated faster, and they'll tend to have weaker batteries because batteries degrade over time. But in this particular case, I think you'd be okay. As for software, you probably will get one less year of software updates than if you bought the latest and greatest OnePlus 8 phones. But because OnePlus generally gives a full 3 years of support to all their flagships, versus 2 for most companies, this phone will still be good all the way up to Android 12. And as for battery life, thankfully the phone had good battery life at launch. And so even though you probably will face some degradation, because it's not a really old phone, it'll probably be around about 10%, which moves its battery life from good to okay. Nothing to write home about, but more importantly, nothing to complain about. And this is helped by the fact that it does charge pretty quickly. It doesn't have wireless charging, it doesn't have a headphone jack, and it doesn't have an IP rating against water and dust. But to be fair, in the 10 years I've been testing phones, I've never accidentally broken a phone through water, so this would never stop me from getting a phone I wanted. And apart from those things, and the older Snapdragon 855 chipset, if you've got a really keen eye, this phone would slide in almost seamlessly into the lineup of 2020 $800-900 smartphones. And for $300 to $350, that's about as good as you can hope for. If you're wondering why this phone, why is this phone in particular such good value now and not just every 2019 flagship? Well, it's primarily because when this phone came out, the one complaint people had about it, pretty much the only negative that you'd see in any review, apart from the 3 small things I just mentioned, is just the fact that it was expensive. The fact that it was quite a bit more expensive than the OnePlus 6 that came before it. But that's not an issue anymore. The price has dropped dramatically because even though it's only been out for a year and a few months, OnePlus has already released 2 successors to this, and is coming up to their 3rd. Apart from that price, people had nothing to complain about. There's no performance compromise, there's definitely no display compromise, and it doesn't have any of those useless gimmicky cameras that you see on some phones nowadays. I've been actively trying to find some sort of Achilles heel, some sort of one thing to bear in mind if you are going to get this, but honestly, I couldn't. As long as you're comfortable with buying a used or refurbished phone, then it all just works. And speaking of things that just work, about a year ago I got a random email from Surfshark VPN. They asked if I wanted to partner up with them, and I remember thinking at this time, I haven't actually heard of Surfshark VPN, but sure, let me give it a test and see if I like it. And I did. It does all the basic VPN stuff, like keeping your browsing secure and anonymous. And I'd be traveling around the world for launch events, and I'd be using this to access UK Netflix while I'm sitting in China, for example. So that's fine, but now that I've been using this for over a year and a half, and I've seen a lot of other VPNs crop up, it's pretty clear to me that a lot of them are borderline daylight robbery. They'll charge you like $20-30 per person per month for VPN access. Surfshark costs $1.99 per month for an unlimited number of simultaneous connections. And there are some unique features too. There's something called HackLock, which is designed to give you alerts should your passwords or email be compromised. And I like the fact that using the Surfshark app on my MacBook, I can tap once in the bar at the top and quick connect to the last server I was connected to. So check the link in the description and use code BOSS. There's now a bigger discount than ever. It's 85% off and an extra 3 months for free. Thanks a lot for watching. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you